Well, welcome everybody to our webinar. We are going to hear the second round of Mastering Your Website. This is Mastering Your Website 201 with fabulous Tim Esposito. If you have not seen the 101 webinar, I will send you a link to that too so that you can get the benefit of Tim's wisdom for both the beginners, us beginners, and for the advanced people. Let's see. I think everybody knows about Tim. He is a very supportive webmaster. He has helped us in the IDL SIG with our website on a number of occasions. He's always responsive, always knowledgeable, and always generous. He is now a a fellow with STC, a full-fledged fellow, and this is the picture that we're looking at was when he received his fellowship.
I'm the one on the right.
Um, That's right. You are the one on the right. Um, what else can we say about you? Oh, you're newly elected to be Secretary of STC, so you're STC royalty. And we're just so glad, we're delighted that you're here with us and that you're going to share some of that big giant brain with us today. So without further ado, take it away, Tim.
Thank you, Vicky. That was very nice. So yes, welcome to Mastering Your Website 201. Moderate WordPress, some Google tools, and cPanel. And as noted, I'm the one on the right. This was from Summit last year when Nikki and I both were awarded fellows. So brief introduction, which Vicky's already provided an excellent one. The short of it is I do way too much stuff for STC. So if you can think of something, I may have been involved with it. This year, I was the Associate Fellow Committee Chair. So my committee helped pick out the people that will be honored as Associate Fellows this year at the virtual summit. I am the incoming secretary for the society. And in the past, I was the pretty much everything for the Philadelphia Metro chapter. How did I get started on website stuff? So a million years ago, when I was in college, I had a job in the computer lab. And in the summertime, the computer lab job was pretty boring. So I downloaded a website because that's what you did, and then you printed it out. So I printed out the entire website because you could do that. And it taught me how to code HTML, which I did using Notepad and manually typing in all the tags. And I created a really lame website, which was just a bunch of bookmarks, basically, because at the time you only had the internet in the computer lab. And if you wanted to remember how to get to a website, you either had to remember the entire URL or you created your own website with the URL written into it. Somehow, this fairly lame and simplistic website got me a job as a paid webmaster for a hospital in Philadelphia as an internship for one semester, which was great because back then paid internships were, I don't know, rare as hen's teeth. So I jumped at that and I had a 2-day job working in the downtown area of Philadelphia in McGee Rehabilitation Hospital. And in order to update their website, I had to download the HTML, edit it in Notepad, and then connect via dial-up using Prodigy or AOL or one of those old services, CompuServe, something like that, and FTP the file back up to the server. Things have changed. Here's a picture of what the website looked like relatively recently, and thankfully none of the stuff that I did in the 1990s remains. So jumping forward a couple of decades, in 2012, I took over the Philadelphia Metro chapter website, which had been hosted by some other web group, and someone had converted parts of it to WordPress. So I jumped in feet first, or maybe head first, and got some books on WordPress and revamped the entire website, which they're still using that model to this day. And then in 2015, I was asked by the CAC chair, Cindy Powell, to create a website for the CAC, which is the Community Affairs Committee for the Society. And the idea behind this website was to promote the STC hosting of your website, which all the SIGs had to do and the chapters are encouraged to do. And we wanted to create a model website and also to be able to promote activities for the CAC. So I created a website from scratch using WordPress, using the templates that STC wanted me to use. And that site still exists to this day. And then most recently, I've created a one-day workshop for the Spectrum Conference, which is the SDC Rochester Conference, which was supposed to be a week or two ago, but due to extraordinary events right now, it got pushed to the fall. But I created a one-day workshop based on this webinar and the 101 webinar, which someday I hope to give because I've spent a lot of time developing it, and I think it would be a great way for people to learn how to use WordPress efficiently and effectively. So who wants to pay attention to this particular webinar? People that have some web mastering experience, even if you're a beginner, you'll get something out of this. If you are a little bit more experienced, you'll still learn some new tips and tricks in here. Leaders who share a passion for technical communication and want their community website to be an example for their members. So we're the Society for Technical Communication, which means we should communicate technically and be very good at it. And what better way to do that than to create an effective and useful website? So if you want to improve your website from being a basic one to a more sophisticated one, this might give you some tips and tricks on managing your website. And this applies to chapter and SIG leaders because well, more chapter leaders than SIG leaders, because some of the stuff that I show here is behind the scenes, and SIGs for some reason do not have access to that. That would be the cPanel stuff. But all the WordPress stuff can be used by the SIG leaders and the chapter leaders. Now, periodically through this presentation, I will pause for questions, and Vicky will then scan the chat list and see if there are any questions to be asked and answered. So here's a broad overview of what we're going to be talking about in brightly colored arrow format. First, we're going to talk about security because security is very important. I've seen sites get hacked and taken over, and it's usually just because of a small thing that was left undone or not up to date. So this is something that everyone should take seriously. I will talk about customizing your site by adding connections to social media, working with event calendars to promote your content and events to your reading audience, and also how to manage your mail list subscriptions. Next, we'll go a little bit deeper into Google Analytics in case you want to see who is accessing your site, what they're reading on your site, and where they're coming from. Next up is SEO, which is search engine optimization. That is how Google learns to find the stuff on your site. So when people search for certain phrases, will your site, with all its answers, turn up the results in the Google search for your intended audience? We'll move into cPanel, which is the behind the scenes section. We'll talk about the antivirus that's in there, file management, and FTP. And last up, we'll talk about privacy because, as you recall, a few years ago, they enacted a new rule for the EU saying everyone needs to know what cookies are being collected and how their data is being used. And now whenever you go to a website, you get a little pop-up saying, we're using cookies for this reason. Are you okay with that? We can make your site do that too. So first up is security. Wow, that looks secure. So a good way to make your site secure is to keep your WordPress version, your plugins, your themes, all the stuff that you install up to date, because that is a very common entry point. You're using an outdated something on your site, and there is a vulnerability in that, and someone has learned how to exploit that to get access to your site. So, but there is a lot more that you can do than just that. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about these 4 plugins. So as you recall from 101, or if not, plugins are little pieces, little programs that you can install on your WordPress site. They are sometimes free and they are often not free. The ones that I have here, these are all free, but they all have the option to have a paid level. I have yet to activate any of those paid levels, and some of these offer way more functionality than others, but these are some of the top rated ones that I found and used to help secure websites. The first one we'll talk about is WordFence. So this one I found to be invaluable because when I was the Philadelphia Metro chapter president a few years ago, our website got hacked. And apparently someone was hosting music sharing services out of it in sub directory in the file structure. And the only way that we realized was the site stopped working because it kept looking for some bad file. And I'd go in and clean it up and remove the bad file, and then 2 days later it would happen again. So I started digging deeper, and in doing so, I found this particular plugin, and when I ran it, it pointed out all of this malware that had been installed behind the scenes on my site. So they've got a really neat scan that you can run, and it goes through all of these little checks here, and it'll tell you when it finds problems. So when I found all of these problems on my site, in the results found section, right now the site is clean, it had like 150 to 200 different items that were problematic. And in doing so, I was able to pinpoint those files, those folders, those directories, and I was able to delete them and clean them off and get the site clean again. Now this plugin has many other features, but what I found particularly useful is the scan. It does other stuff too, but such as, let's see, it'll email your webmaster when your plugs and your themes are outdated. That kind of information is useful. But what I really liked about this was the scanning. And each of these plugins has many, many features. And I'm only, this is a highlight just so you know what to look for in the different plugins. So I'm not going to detail everything in each of these, but just to give you a high level what sort of functionality they offer. The next one that I recommended is the LOGINIZER security. This helps you against brute force attacks on your site. Now, a brute force attack is when someone says, okay, I'm going to try and hack into the site, and I know their username is admin, and I'm just going to keep sending in passwords using the admin login until I guess their password is password 1, and then I will have complete access to their site. This plugin helps prevent that. So one of the things that it does is you can set a maximum number of retries. So if people try to guess your password too many times, they'll be locked out. So they might know that your user is admin, but every 3 tries is going to lock them out for 15 minutes. And then they can have a maximum lockout of 5 times. And after that, they're locked out for 24 hours. So this would dissuade anyone who's got a computer program set up to keep resubmitting passwords to try and hack in. Another thing that this particular plugin recommends is changing the file permissions. The file permissions are who can update, who can view, who can remove files on your web server. Here it lists several directories and even an individual file, and it says, okay, your file access in the first one is 750. We recommend 755. Now, I don't know what the numbers are offhand, and there is a key to that which you can use in, which you can see in the file management tool in cPanel, but it recommends you change your settings to make them more secure. So the WP config PHP file, that one is pretty important. You don't want anyone coming in and editing that. So why don't we give it less active permissions is what it's suggesting here. And you can change all of this in the file manager in cPanel, or if you're using an FTP agent or client, you can do it there as well. And I'll get into that at the end. So the takeaway here is the files have more settings than just, read, write. It's who can read, write, local people, universal people, authorized people. There are many different options, and this tool will recommend particular settings. And some of these other plugins do that as well, and I've noticed that some of them have somewhat conflicting settings. But this is one that pretty much lays out the basic files for you in an easy find location. The next one I have here is SUCURI? Security? I don't know. This one has some pretty cool things called hardening. So hardening is where it, well, I'll read it to you. It says, to harden your website means to add different layers of protection to reduce potential attack surface. An example here, it's offering to prevent, let's see, firewall protection, to block PHP files from being uploaded, to block PHP files in the WT content directory, and block files from being placed in another directory. So to flash back to the 101, PHP files are what runs WordPress. In a traditional website, you've got HTML files. In WordPress, you have PHP files. And what those do is they say, look at a database and render the website page that you want to see based on the content in the database. So your website information is stored in a database, not in various HTML files. And these PHP files are what links to the database. Unfortunately, if you upload files that are PHP files to a browser or to your web server, they can be malicious. So that is one way that people hack into your site, is that they put their own PHP files in there which execute, because they're a script, to do things illegally. So what this is doing here, it's preventing those files from being placed in sensitive locations on your web server. And it's very easy to apply this because you can just go through and click on these. Now, I think the firewall one, when you click that, it says, oh, upgrade to the paid version to use our firewall. But the other ones will turn green, as you see with the verify, the WordPress vision, and stuff like that. So this tool is very cool because you can very easily just go through and say, yes, I want to make it that much more difficult for people to hack into my site at a click of these buttons. You can also customize how you get security alerts. And there are a lot of ways you can get security alerts. And you might want to say, oh, this is great. And you plug this in, and then you find that you get like 10 emails a day or more because something happened or someone signed in or failed login attempts if people are trying to hack your site. So you might want to come through and review this after you have it running to make sure that you're getting the notifications that you really want so you don't lose what you're trying to gain just because you're being inundated by a deluge of messages from the security system. And the last one is the all-in-one WordPress security and firewall. This one is pretty epic. I like this one a lot. This is one that I found a little bit later after the other ones, and I've become a big fan of this one. It has a ton of features in it, some of which overlap with things that I already spoke of. So I'm only going to go into a handful of these. And in the workshop that I created, I go more into depth as to how each of these have all the details in each of these plugins. So, but in this presentation, I don't have time for all that. So I'm going to do some of the things that it does differently from the other ones. So one thing that it has is you can set up a CAPTCHA setting. So a CAPTCHA is, could be one of those things where, oh, click only on the boxes that have cars in it. Those things that everyone hates to do. And it used to be type in the weird word that's all scribbly. This does that, but it does it better. So there's a basic one that you can do, which will, when you're trying to sign into WordPress, it'll give you a math problem. It'll say the word 11 plus numerals for 4. And then you have to type in, 15. And as long as you can do that math, you can sign in. You also have the option of using the Google reCAPTCHA. Google's pretty cool. Now they've got one which does everything, all that checking behind the scenes, and all you have to do is check a box. You can enable that also. So I have on all the sites that I manage the mathematic one. So whenever I have to sign in, I have to do some sort of a relatively simple basic math problem to prove that I'm not an evil computer bent on world domination. One other thing that this particular plugin does is they sort of gamify it. See how there's like a 20 out of 20 points there and a 10 out of 10? If you go through and you process all these things, you get more and more points, and it gives you a score. So you first install this plugin and you'll have a score of like 20 or something, and it'll show you a dial and it'll be all red, like, oh, you're not secure, this is horrible. The more you do, the higher your score, so you can be more confident that you have more security on your system. And having said that, you don't want to check all the boxes to get all of those little 20 points or 10 points or whatever they are. But it is worth going through each of the tabs and each of the options in this plugin to review what you can possibly do, because there's a lot that you can do out there to secure your website. Now, I talked about backing up your database in the 101 class, and in that way you would go into cPanel and there's a backup button, and that's great, but it's very manual. You have to remember to go in there and click the button and do it, every week or every month or whatever you want to do. This plugin has an automatic backup. So you say, oh, I want automatic backup. How often do you want it to run? This is once a month. And who do you want it sent to? You put in the email address. So for the sites that I manage, I put in, for every 4 weeks or every 2 weeks or however, it varies depending on how often the sites are updated. And then I get the backup emailed to me automatically, which is really great. So if you were ever to lose that website, you could restore it fairly simply using this backup system. Next up, next layer of security is SSL and HTTPS. So back in the day, everything was just HTTP. Now you see HTTPS, and the S is for secure. So that means that you've got something that's a secure sockets layer. which in this illustration is showing an insecure connection. It's not that great an illustration, but they're showing that when you are connecting to the internet, you're in an encrypted connection when you're using HTTPS, which is what you would use on any site where you would want to give personal information or your credit card information, that kind of thing. And at first, only stores did that, but now as the market has grown more attacked by internet pirates, everything wants to be secure because maybe they are collecting your personal data as per all those little cookies you agreed to send to them. So one thing that you want to do is set up HTTPS and SSL on your website. And you can do this yourself if you've got direct access to your computer servers. There's a website called Let's Encrypt, and you can get your free SSL certificate from them. If you're using a hosting service like the one that Society provides, you might not be able to do that as easily, but you can contact the Society webmaster group and ask them to set it up and maintain that for you. And in theory, once that is set up, they have it set to auto renew, so your certificate will renew automatically every year, or however frequently it needs to be renewed, and keep your site running in a secure mode. Are there any questions on security?
Tim?
Yes.
For the SSL certificate, is that, so that's just for a WordPress site, right? It's not like what if you had a Google site that is HTTP and you wanted it to go to HTTPS? Is it a simple matter of adding a SSL certificate that you buy like that, or is that just for WordPress?
It can be used on any site. In order to get any site to use HTTPS, you need a certificate. I've never applied it in Google sites. I've had minimal use of Google sites, but the principles are the same. You need to have a certificate and you need to have it tied into your site somehow. The way that it is added to that site varies. A hosted WordPress site is, I think, more sophisticated than a Google site. And I unfortunately do not know how Google sites handle that. But you will need to get a certificate, but you can get it for free from Let's Encrypt. It's a little tricky to do that in some cases, but that is a place where you can get a free certificate.
Thank you.
Sure. I see Jeffrey Brown has sent a chat message, and he wants to know if it's okay to use multiple security plugins on one site. All of those ones that I talked about just now, I have all 4 of them running at the same time. They don't seem to conflict with one another. Like I said, one of them recommends certain file restrictions that are slightly different from one of the ones the other ones recommend, but those are just recommendations. So if they say set it to 334 or whatever the code was, and the other one says set it to 337, it doesn't hurt anything. I'm not running multiple virus scans. I'm not doing anything that would really conflict. And if there is some sort of a conflict, such as number of times that it takes to sign someone out when they're trying to hack into your site, I believe it goes with the one with the smaller number. So if one says, okay, lock the site after 10 tries, and the other one says lock it after 5, the site should log after 5, although I have not personally tried that, but in theory, that's how it should work. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, let's move on to the next section, customizing your site. We're going to talk about 3 things here that are great for communities and even public or personal websites, and that's social media integration, event calendars, and mail list subscriptions. So everyone uses social media now, it seems, even my mom. She may not use Twitter, but she knows about Facebook, and even my 82-year-old dad had a LinkedIn profile for a while. So when you have a professional society organization website, like the IDL SIG or one of your chapters, and you want to promote an event, you want to put this across the board to promote it to as many people as possible. And these days, it means not just sending an email, but also putting it on Twitter, putting it on Facebook, posting it on LinkedIn, any other number of sites. So it would be great if all of this was done automatically. And I have found that there is a very, very popular plugin called JETPACK, and JETPACK lets you do just that. So the way that it works is you install the JETPAK plugin, which has a free version and also a paid version. And it works fine in the free version. And you will connect your various social media to that website with your accounts. Facebook requires that you're posting to a Facebook group page instead of just a regular post. So you need to be a manager in a group to do that. But the Twitter and the LinkedIn will go to whatever accounts that you specify. LinkedIn, it won't go to your LinkedIn group, but it'll go to your local, whatever you sign in as. It'll post as if you had posted it there. And the idea here is you create a post on your WordPress site, not a page. A page is a static piece of content. A post is like a blog post, something that's timely. So, oh, this month our meeting is this. So when you post that post, if you have these connections established, it'll automatically push content to whichever one of these that you've set up a connection for. It'll go to your Facebook group, it'll go to Twitter, it'll go to LinkedIn, and apparently Tumblr. I don't know anyone that uses Tumblr for this, but and there's a few more if you use the app, I think. But this is great because you can put all of your content in the post and it'll push it out to those other mediums. And if people read the content on those other mediums, the link will drive back to your website to see the full data. So that way you don't have to create it here, and then now let me shorten it down, put it on Twitter, and then let me put it over here on Facebook, and then let me put it over here on LinkedIn. It'll do it all for you automatically. Some of it is not awesome, but it will do it for you. Doom. Okay, next up is an events calendar. When you are running an organization and you have meetings, whether they're webinars or in person when people are not all located in their houses permanently, you might want your public to know what's coming up. So an easy way to do this is to create a Google Calendar and then put all of your events in the Google Calendar, and then you can embed that Google Calendar right on your website, and it will update instantly, which is really cool because when you generate a new event in that Google Calendar, it's instantly on your website. You don't have to do anything else. So in order to do this, you need to have a Google account, and that with a calendar that you can create any number of calendars with a Google account, and that calendar is designated to be your public calendar, and then it will give you code that you can then embed into WordPress. So it's really cool because look at this. This one even has the links to sign to Eventbrite. So you just put that in the description in the calendar event, and it automatically appears on the website. So the picture that you're seeing here, this is actually from my chapter website. There's a calendar, and when you click on any of the events, they expand and show you all the details for those and how to register for them. It's very slick. So how do you set this up? You create a new, I have a Gmail calendar or a Google calendar specifically for scheduling events. You don't want to put your personal calendar out there so you're having lunch with your mom or something. That you don't need that. You want a calendar that's just for your public events. My chapter created its own Gmail account just for that, but you could just have any calendar that people have access to that you are shared publicly. So there is a share option on the calendar, and anyone, well, you want to share it with all the people in your community that will be contributing to the calendar. So for example, in the Philadelphia chapter, the president does that. The vice president is in charge of programming, so they have access. And the other elected leaders of the community also have access to the calendar. So anyone can go in and put any events out there, and that will be made public. And the last thing you want to do is you get some code from the Google Calendar, and you paste that into WordPress in the page that you want to display your calendar. So let's go through some of that. Here we've got a simple calendar, and you can see it's called the Events for STC PMC. And if we click on the settings in the upper right, here are the sharing settings, for example. So on the left, you'll see that it says access permissions. These are all the people that have access to edit this calendar. Almost all of those things are for the chapter leadership, and then apparently I'm still in there because I'm the one that set this up, at least in the screenshot. So all these people can make changes and manage the sharing on it. So that way it's just not lost if someone forgets the password to this account. And then the next up, there's an integration section, which it's on the left-hand side, and that list there, it's about third from the bottom, just above birthdays. If you click on that, it jumps to this, and it says, oh, here's your calendar ID, here's the public URL to the calendar, and then if you want to embed this on a website, copy this code. All you have to do is highlight, copy it, and then you go into WordPress and you switch into text mode. So remember, when you're editing things in WordPress, it's usually in a WYSIWYG, which on this would be visual. But if you click the text tab, and they may have renamed this in the new format, the block format, but you can always get to a text version of your website when you're editing a page or a post. When you switch to that, it shows you some basic HTML. So all you have to do then is paste in that HTML code that Google generated for you. And when you do that and you switch back to visual mode and you publish your post or your page, that calendar will appear as illustrated earlier. And it's really cool in here because if you look down at the bottom there, it's got like a width and a height and a border. Does it scroll? If you want to make it a different width, okay, maybe it defaulted to 400 and that's too small. Okay, type in 600, see how does that do? What does the height look like? You can change all this stuff here if you want to, if you want to tweak it. So that's it. You create the calendar, you share it with people, you put content in the calendar, you get the little code from the sharing section of the calendar preferences, and you paste it into the code section of your website, and then you get a calendar on your website. And just like that, as soon as you make a post on that calendar, it's instantly on any website that has that calendar being shared in this manner. Very handy. Next up, we'll talk about mailing list subscriptions. There are different mailing lists out there. My chapter uses MailChimp because it is free, although they have tightened the restrictions on being free, but we still qualify for that. But I know a lot of communities use this or they use Constant Contact. So in order to facilitate managing this more, I've come up with a way to get people to sign up for the mailing list. So MailChimp had a plugin that was putting your name and an email address and subscribe, and you get the community newsletter. Well, what if your community or you have multiple newsletters? Philadelphia has one that's the general newsletter, and they also have one for its Conduit conference. And we keep those separate because we have people that come from all over the country for Conduit, but they don't necessarily want to hear about the monthly meeting that's local to Philadelphia. So if we want to make an announcement to attract more presenters, we might use just the conference mailing list, but in addition to the general mailing list. So if you have multiple mailing lists that you want people to subscribe to for your organization, how do you get them to sign up for those? So I discovered that there's this, again, free little piggy here. He will give you a nice little plugin that you can install. And what it does is it gets an API key from MailChimp, which is really easy to do because you can just click that link that says get your API key here, and as long as you're signed into MailChimp, it'll give you the key. You paste it in, you save the changes, and it drops you into this editor. So here we're in WordPress, and we've installed the plugin, and it's some basic HTML, which you have the option of manually coding, or you can use a form builder to build this. So what we have here is on the left, the HTML, and on the right, what the general output would look like. So here we have email address, first name, last name. And the cool thing is there are 3 options here. One for the announcements, one for our South Jersey networking group, which meets every other month or so for people that can't make it into Pennsylvania. And then there's the one, as I mentioned earlier, just for conference announcements. So you have complete control over this. You can, you want them in a different order, you want different bullets, different, italics, whatever you want. You can put that code in on the left and it will generate it for you. And then you take this particular content and you plug it into, it gives you this ID, and you add this as a widget, let's say in WordPress, which is something that gets placed in one of the sidebars, for example. And then what you end up with is on the left is the one that I created that allows you to sign up for multiple lists, and then versus the out of the box one on the right, which is only for one list. This way people can sign up for all three of them at the same time if they want. And when you're done, it just appears on the, wherever you place it on your website. So that way you can get people signing up for your correspondence as they like, all in one spot. I also recommend going in and creating a page saying, okay, here's your mailing list. What are these really for? So this is what the announcements are. This is what the South Jersey group is about. This is what the conference is about. So that way people, if they want more information, they can go here and also sign up and also learn about it. And there's an option in MailChimp saying, oh, well, what page did they go to sign up for the mailing list? You can put this page in there as well. So this is just a page that I made, which lists all of the mailing lists that my group organizes. MailChimp is pretty cool. You can have different types of forms, and when you go into it, you can have these as pop-ups or embedded forms or driving to another page. There's a lot of options for how to get people to sign up for your list. So it's one thing to maintain a list, it's another thing to draw new people into your list. And the goal of this was to get new people to come to your website to say, yeah, I want to sign up for your mailing list. Because I've already been like, oh, let me go to such and such site. Oh, this looks great. How do I know more about their group? Because they had a really great webinar last month that someone told me about. How do I get notifications about that in the future? Well, if you have these things embedded on your site, you'll get, transient people like me coming in saying, oh, yeah, that sounds good, and sign me up for the list. So now I know about several SCC chapters events, which are great because a lot of them offer webinars. So I don't need to go to anywhere but my study here for a webinar. So boom, I can sign up for that so I know if they're hosting a webinar that I want to attend, I'm on their mailing list. Are there any questions on social media integrations?
So we do have a question from Dave. Dave wants to know if there is any way that we could change the style of the appearance of the embedded Google Calendar so that it matches the style and appearance of your site.
I think to some extent you can, but it might be limited. If we look at let me just travel back in time here.
Yeah, I did notice a color. There's a
Yeah, if you
color
look at the
code.
highlighted text down here, you can control some of the colors. So I do see a background color declaration. That would be the BG color. That is in the exact center of the block. And there's another color listed here. I'm not sure what that is. So I would say limited, yes. I don't know that you can necessarily change the fonts and styles, and it may be possible, but it's not declared directly by the default text. But I'm willing to bet that if you did some Google searches saying, how do I make the calendar use a different font? There's probably a way that you can just drop in a semicolon and then a font declaration in here, and it'll use that font. I'm guessing. I have never tried that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's doing that because it's rendering this through HTML. So if you just declare the style information in the format that Google is looking for, there's a good chance that it'll accept that. Now, having said that, I've never actually tried it, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was an option.
He says,
Tim, this is awesome.
I think so.
I've already done this on my website, and I'm so excited because I have to put everything. Normally, I put everything in the Google Calendar, and then I go to my website and I put it in the website, and now I just have to update it one place. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's very slick, and it's a big time saver because before we did this, it was like, oh, we had an events page. Okay, well, we have to first we create an email, and that was one thing, and then we created Twitter, and that was another thing. Then we put it on Facebook, and that was another thing, and then we had to put it in the calendar, and then we had to put it in the events page. So one event, it was 6 steps to get it everywhere, and then inevitably one of those was forgotten and it fell off, and now it's like, oh, you put it in one place, it pushes to all the social media, you put it in the calendar, and it pushes to the website and everything else, and it all ties together. It's pretty slick. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take the not prettiness of the calendar over the definite convenience.
You can control how the calendar looks. In the screenshots that I had it in a list style. because my community only does things once a month. So you want to see what's happening over the next couple of months. And when you choose the list style, it shows like the next 3 things, even if they're 3 months out. You can control how many months out it looks, but you can also make it be a weekly listing. You can make it be a calendar grid. So if you have something every day of the month, you might want to have, you know, your typical calendar image, you know, a bunch of boxes with different things in them. You can change all of that in that text that I showed earlier. I just picked the journal method. I think I forget what it was called. I think it was journal. So that way you can see
It was
it's
agenda.
more of a bulleted list. Yeah, the agenda. That's it. Just because that fits with what PMC was doing. But if you're running an organization that's pushing something out every 3 days, you know, pick a different calendar style. Change the size of it. Make it longer, taller, skinnier, wider. Change the background color. You've got a lot of adaptability there.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, we're going to go into, we still have a bit to go, and we're down to 15 minutes. So I'm going to go a little bit faster on some of these things. These are more nice to haves that people said, Tim, teach me how to do this. So I went and learned how to do this. Google Analytics is, it's free, which is cool. Like I said, everything I'm trying to teach you guys today is pretty much free. And there is a paid version of this, but trust me, you don't need it. So Google Analytics lets you track how many people are coming to your website and where they are coming from. For a chapter, that's just some kind of gravy, like who are we reaching out to? Is it mainly people from our community? Are we getting a lot of hits from California? We just promoted our new conference, whether it's Conduit or Spectrum. How many people are coming to the website to read about that? How many people are coming to do this now? Where are they coming from? So when you install Google Analytics, you connect it with your site and it analyzes any of the hits you get to your site. It's free. You have to go to analytics.google.com and you need a Google account to sign in. So if you've got some sort of a Gmail or Google admin account that is used for your webmaster or for the admin for your organization, that's the one that I would set it up to. And then there's this really cool free Monster Insights plugin. You get this and it ties in with Google Analytics. You put in your Google Analytics, you put in your Google Analytics information, and in the past, if you wanted Google Analytics, what you had to do was you go into every single page on your website and you put in a piece of code in the text entry mode instead of the WYSIWYG, and that ties into your Google Analytics so you can see who is hitting this. Well, that's very cumbersome because you have to go behind the scenes and edit it for every single page. If you use this plugin, it does all that for you. It doesn't even create the code. It all works through the plugin. So you get that complete analytics without any of the setup hassle. You just need to create the analytics account on analytics.google.com and tie it in using this plugin. It's very easy to do. This is the one I recommend. There were a few others too, but this is the one that I found is the easiest and has the best output. And it's pretty cool because it'll even give you, when you're in WordPress in the dashboard, there'll be a little analytics tab and you can click on it and it'll show you, oh, your site hits went up. And this was kind of cool when my chapter was promoting its conference. Oh, look, we rolled out all this stuff for the conference and it's getting closer and we're putting out blog posts and all this. And you can see how many people are coming to the site to see information about a particular event. So like I said, it's more gravy than anything, but it's kind of cool to set up and it's not very hard to do. Similar to this is the search engine optimization. And this is where you use Google Search Console. And what you're doing is you're telling the Google search, the code in the searching engine, what to look for and where to look on your site. So people might be searching for your organization and they type in Google and they don't find it on your site. They find it on someone else's site because they said, hey, I went to an event hosted by someone else. And that's where it shows up. But it shouldn't be. It should be your site that they find when they search for it. The SEO enables you to target when you're looking for your content that it goes to the stuff on your site. There is a Google Search Console, of which I've got an image here, and you can see that it's for SCC PMC up in the upper right. And you can set this up for multiple pages, including differentiating between HTTP and HTTPS. In the screenshot, I have it set to the HTTP. So that way, is it going to send someone to the HTTP version or the HTTPS version? So you need to validate that you can access your site. And once you've done that, you sign into this and boom, you can say, this is the site. And there's all these analytical tools. And again, this is probably above and beyond what you would need for your personal site or your community site. If you're running your own business, then it is much more important to drive people to your site so they can find you and find the content that you have published. So that's where you would go in and analyze all this stuff and really work on it. It's not hard to set up, especially if you're using a free plugin. So this is Yoast is very popular, and if you install this plugin, you need to have your Google account set up with the Google Search Console. So you set that stuff up in that website first, then you install this plugin. And once you have that plugin set up and configured, it goes through and it'll even in WordPress show you, oh, well, your Yoast rating is this. You can improve the readability on the site by doing these steps. So if you've got, you know, a ton of content out there that you want people to see and find, this plugin will make recommendations on how to improve the content in your site so people can find it more easily using Google search. Are there any questions on these low-level, behind-the-scenes analytics and searching and stuff like that?
The chat window is clear. I did forget to say that Dave said thank you for the feedback on the Google Calendar.
Oh, cool. You're welcome. Okay, we're moving into some of the closing sections. So in the first webinar that I did, I talked about cPanel, and I talked about a few of the things in there like email forwarders and stuff like that. Here's an image of cPanel from the CAC website. And each of these dark bars with a plus sign, if you were to click on any of those plus signs, it would expand any number of options in here. There are literally maybe hundreds of things under each of those. And of course, I'm not going to go through them. And I believe the team that writes the documentation for cPanel, they have submitted to the STC competitions in the past and have been winners. So they have some really good documentation out there to support cPanel. So what I'm going to talk about today are a few things, not all of these, of course, that I found helpful lurking in the depths of cPanel. Now, people running SIG web have access to cPanel due to the way that the hosting is set up for the SIG websites. But people running chapters or your own personal hosted WordPress, you may have cPanel depending on who your host is. Not all hosting companies use cPanel, but I found that it is very popular and very powerful. So more and more hosting groups are using it. And if you do not use cPanel, there is probably an analog in whatever service you are using for the things that I'm talking about today. So one of them is the antivirus. This is in the advanced group. It is not a fancy antivirus. You can scan your mail directory, you can scan your home directory, your web space, and your public FTP space. I found that when my chapter's website had all that malware, it would find problems in here and it would sort of fix them, but it wasn't great. But at least it let me know that there were problems so I could use those security apps to dig deeper and where to look for it and when things were showing up as clean. And this service is something that you have to run manually. It doesn't run automatically. So, you know, if you're the webmaster, you might want to create a task list, you know, once a week or once a month or however frequently you think this might be a problem to come in, back stuff up, run your virus scan, do any sort of admin tasks. Create a task for yourself to do that. Next up is the file manager. I know this is drastically different, but like I said, this is a bunch of unassociated widgets that are really cool that you should have access to. So the file manager is just like the file manager on your computer, only it looks at your web server. So this is an example based on the CAC website. So when you run the file manager from cPanel, it looks like this. You can see many subfolders here. And the one that your website actually lives in is the public_HTML folder. So if you were ever to just delete that folder, your entire website would go away, so don't do that. But in here, you can see on the right-hand side permissions. So if we travel back in time a half hour to when I was talking about security permissions, you can see each of the folders and files have a different permission number. That matches what the SUCURI app or plugin was recommending you change to. So in here, you can click on a file or a folder, and then there is a permissions button, which looks like there's a little key on it, and it's in the toolbar in the center of the screenshot. And it's grayed out right now because I don't have anything selected. But if you were to select a folder or a file and click that, it would give you a pop-up like this. And this will show you, okay, here's what 750 versus 755 means, which was one of the recommendations the security recommended you change. So 755 means that the world has permission to read and execute the files in that folder, whereas 750 is more restrictive. People in a designated group and users can do it, but not everyone can have those powers. So if you want to go in and make these permission limitations as recommended by one of the security apps, this is a place where you can do that fairly simply. It'll say change it to this number, you come in here and you can change it to that number and click the change permissions button and you're set. Now similar to this is FTP. So FTP is the ability to use a program on your computer to access the files on your web server. So this is slightly different from what I just spoke of because that's using a browser to be a file manager for your web server, whereas this is comparing your personal computer that you're on to the web server and moving files back and forth between them. The first one was just editing files on the web server. This lets you upload and download files. So there are FTP settings in cPanel, and when you go in, it'll say, oh, here's some information. Here's the server, and here's a configuration file. So I personally like to use FileZilla because it sounds cool and it's easy to use. And you say, how do I connect to my FTP account using this? So they conveniently have this blue and this gray button here, and SFTP is the secure version of it. It uses SSL to connect as opposed to just regular FTP. So I recommend the SFTP when possible. It gives you a little file. You go into FileZilla and you open that file and it'll show you how to connect to your information. And when you do that, it looks a lot like your file manager that you might have on your computer. And on one side, it'll show your local computer, and on the right side, it shows the web host. So the files that you see on the right panes look very similar to what was in the file manager view that I showed earlier. But the benefit of doing this here is if you have a large group of files on one side, say on your computer on the left, and you need to load them up onto the web server on the right, you can click them and send them over, or you can pull them back off. You can also do anything you'd expect to do in a file manager, to, edit and delete things right on the server. Very handy to have. You do not necessarily need cPanel to do this. You just need the information on how to connect. cPanel provides you the information in the configuration file, but as you see, if you've got the FTP username, the password, the server, and the port, you can set this up on your own. So this is a very cool way to manage the files on your server. And I see we have a question from Andrew. I am the webmaster of the Policies and Procedures SIG. He is someone I've been working with recently because of their SSL certificate. I'm wondering if I should have access to cPanel. I was told that more SEC handles the cPanel configurations for us webmasters. So to answer Andrew's question, I think it would be great if you had access to that, but the way that the websites were set up for the SIGs several years ago is that they have a communal hosting setup that I don't really understand how they did it, but all of the SIGs share the same kind of cPanel. So therefore, I think that they don't grant you access to it because this is speculation. So that way you don't mess up the configuration for the other groups or something like that. So they hid the access to cPanel from the SIGs. So while it would be nice, any of the things that you would need to do in cPanel, you need to contact webmaster@stc.org in order to accomplish. That includes maybe even email forwarding as well if you're setting that up, which is not optimal, but that is the model that the society decided upon when they switched to be the community hosting organization about 5 or 6 years ago.
So Andrew says thank you, and Dave had the same question. He wanted to know how can he access cPanel. He doesn't see it in his navigation. So
cPanel is not part of WordPress. You would have to get the information from your hosting organization, and it's a separate URL that you would sign into with a separate login from WordPress. If it is a SIG, you can't do it. If it's a chapter, then you should have access to it. And if you do not, then you need to reach out to the webmaster and get access to it.
Yeah, they have let us, as the IDL SIG, they have let us do our mail forwarding.
Okay.
Because that's relatively simple. Also, if you have a high turnover, or you're
yes.
in a turnover season, then it's just kind of easier for you to do it yourself. It's not all that intuitive an interface, so I do have to kind of squint at it a little bit and remember what I did last year, because you don't do it that often. But.
Right. Yeah, cPanel, like I said, that's why I did more of it in the 201 than the 101, because it is a little bit more technical and yeah, not as user friendly.
Yeah, I also wanted to make the comment, Tim, that this is very much like a workshop. Apparently, Kelly set up her Google Calendar interface right during your webinar, and Dave and Andrew have been poking around in their websites too. So it's very hands-on. While we listen, we're also working along with you.
Okay, well, I've got about 5 more minutes, which fits because we started about 5 minutes into the slot. So let me just roll into that real fast, and then we'll have a wrap up. So troubleshooting malware. This is just little tips and tricks here. Run the virus scan from cPanel to find out if there's a problem. Run the scan from WordFence, and then edit or remove any compromised files found by WordFence using the FTP or the file management tool that I just showed you in cPanel. That's how I was able to save my chapter's website a few years ago at the cost of some of the hair on the top of my head. Last up is privacy, and this is sort of a legal nice to have. I don't know if anyone's really going to come crashing down on SDC websites if they don't have a privacy policy, but WordPress includes a template for privacy policy information as part of it. And you can go into the settings in WordPress, and then there's an actual option there called privacy. When you do that, it says, what page has your privacy policy, or create a new page. And when you do that, it fills in, we're not going to save your data, we're not going to sell it to scumbags, we're not, all that stuff, but you can change it to say that you are, if that's what you're doing. It's just a nice to have that's sort of I think it's a legal requirement for the European Union. So it literally takes 2 minutes to sign in, say, give me this page, and then add it to your menu in WordPress, just so you have it there as legal mumbo jumbo in case someone comes after you for something. I don't know. It's one of those, like, it can't hurt to do it. So I recommend just taking a few minutes to go ahead and do that. We have a Slack group, which I manage, and I believe if you click this link, it'll let you sign in. It'll give you the invite pass or whatever it is to that particular Slack group. I keep this Slack group up all the time, and I have ongoing conversations with various webmasters in the group. So if you ever want some hive mind support for your STC website, you can post it here and see if other people will respond. I most certainly will at some point, because like I said, I have it up constantly. But it's just a good brain share resource for things. So let's go through a summary really fast. What do we talk about today? Lots of things in these little blocks here. So we talk about installing and maintaining security plugins, initiate running your site with SSL using HTTPS, talking about how to use JETPACK to push to social media, how to embed your calendar on your site, how to embed your mail list information on your site to get more people to sign up. Talked about some of the behind the scenes analytics, such as Google Analytics, so you can see who's finding your site, and improving the ability to search for things by using SEO to make Google find your content better. We talked about running virus scans and other security scans on your site, as well as managing your files using either the FTP or the file manager. And the last thing we talked about was providing a privacy policy for your site. So if you're going to scam everyone out of their personal information, they know about it. If you would like any further information, I recommend these sites. The first one's about hardening, which was what one of the tools did. There's a site here on how to install Google Analytics on WordPress, which I used when I created this workshop a few years ago, or this webinar a few years ago. There's some stuff on Yoast, which is the SEO, how to set that stuff up, and some great books. I cannot recommend WordPress for Dummies enough. Even though it says dummy in it, it is not a book for dummies. There is all sorts of useful information in there. Almost nearly as useful as WordPress, the Missing Manual. I used that when I first started doing my chapter WordPress work, and that was a great starting point. I think WordPress for Dummies is a little bit stronger than that one, but they both had good content. And we have any further questions? Michael says he can't click on the slide. Ha ha ha. Can I paste the Slack link in chat? Yes, I can.
And also we have
Later.
your handout. There will be a handout coming to you that you
Yes.
can download. I was looking for the Slack link though in the handout.
Yeah. So let me travel through this to Slack. And I will put that in the chat. Boom. Did it work? No, that's great.
Aww.
There we go. There we go. And if that doesn't work, let me know.
It's on page 65 of your handout.
Yes. So I've created handouts, and I put all the slides on SlideShare, and Vicky's going to send out links to all of that in the follow-up email, along with, I believe, the recording link if you missed the live presentation of this.
So if you are joining us by recording, hi, welcome.
Oh, I love this. It always swaps my
Yeah.
things the wrong way. Doesn't really matter. But anyway, if you want to reach out to me, here's my email that I use. Twitter, you can tweet at me. I have a little personal website on WordPress, which is not the hosted WordPress because that costs money and I'm all about free. And then LinkedIn, feel free to connect with me. Let's see what happens. It opens in the other window. That's what happens.
And the link that you sent.
So I've got this
expired.
This is the Okay. Hang on. This was here we go. So this is what the Slack channel looks like. And let's see, invite people. Let's see, share invite link, copy. See, I thought it was permanent, but okay.
It must expire, or it looks like they've vastly changed the format of the link.
Yeah. Okay. New one in the Slack channel. Sorry, I thought I went in and updated this a couple weeks ago, I thought, but I guess, oh well. New link now. Anyway, so yes, this is what the channel looks like. There's all these different channels in here, and then you can do direct messages with people. I'm constantly working with Liz Fraley on something. One of our side projects right now is to create an automated calendar. And the idea behind this calendar is that if you have one of those event calendars that I described in my presentation today, you can set that up, and she's going to have a meta calendar. So whenever you post something in your group's event calendar, it'll automatically get added to that meta calendar. So if you promote the meta calendar and everyone has different webinars in it, then you can look at that one calendar and see all of the STC webinars and meetings that are being hosted all across the world in one spot. We're still hammering out the details on getting that to work, but that is, I think, a pretty cool feature. So you could, on your website, list not only your calendar, but all of the calendars all conveniently in one calendar, so anyone on your site can see what else is going on elsewhere in society at large. But like I said, that is a work in process. Any other questions now that I gave you a working link? Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm putting this link in the email that I'm going to send as soon as I get the video uploaded.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought the link was supposed to be good forever, but apparently not.
All right. Yeah, the chat is filling up with questions. So we say thank you. Thank you, Tim. This is a lot of information. You make understandable. I might actually be able to figure out how this works on our website. Do you know what version of PHP STC is running?
Yeah, I think Michael is just pulling my leg.
Okay.
No, I don't. I do not have access to the SDC website. I've seen glimpses of it, but not, you'd have to go into the cPanel for the SDC website. And PHP is something that you don't want to mess around with too much. If you pick a version that is too new or too old, it might not be supported. And it's something I did not go into particularly in this session, just because it has the potential of really crashing your site. So you don't want someone saying, yeah, let me just switch to this version, then the whole site blows up. But there are new versions of PHP, and in cPanel you can go in and say, oh, I'm running version 7.1. I want to go to version 7.4. Maybe that doesn't have all the features yet that you were using in 7.1. So it is something to stay on top of, because you want to be somewhat current, but you also want to make sure it doesn't crash your site if you update versions. And some of those security things will say, oh, you're running an outdated version of PHP, update to this version at least. That's when you should consider moving to a new version of PHP.
That's good to know. Jamie says, thanks, lots of good info. Jeffrey says, thanks for the great overview.
You're welcome.
Everybody sign up for the Spectrum workshop.
I'm not sure what the format's going to be for the workshop. It was going to be a full day workshop on a Saturday 2 weeks ago, but of course everything got shut down. And I believe Spectrum is relocating to September 19th, but I am not sure whether or not the workshops will be part of that. Kelly, if she's still on, can probably say more about that.
Yeah, I think we're still having everything on site, and then we're also hoping to have a lot of Spectrum to be virtual as well. So.
Yeah, I asked Anne about that, and the answer I got back was confusing to me. So I'm still not sure whether we're doing the workshop or not. So
I think we would like you to. Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously I haven't seen anybody.
Yeah, I got the impression a lot of it hinged on what RIT wanted to do, because they're hosting you guys.
Yeah.
And, stuff like that.
As far as I know, we'd like to have you.
I'll have to change my dentist appointment then. But yeah.
No, we'd love to have you. And this was very helpful for me for my personal, well, my business personal website. I don't handle the we have a webmaster for the Rochester chapter, but for my company's website, I've already made quite a few changes. And I have a couple other things on my to-do list. So thank you very much.
Sure. And for anyone else, feel free to reach out to me either through the now Slack channel link that works, or send me a message at any of these contact points, and I'll try and help you as best I can.
Lots of thanks being typed into the chat box. And
yeah, Anne says the workshop might be online for Spectrum.
Wow. All right, well, I'm going to stop the recording. We can continue to chat.